Anne Fitz-Gerald is the director of the Balsillie School of International Affairs, and she joins us now from Waterloo, Canada. Good to have you on the program. Can you give us some more context here? Who are the refugees that are under threat, and why are they being targeted?
Well, I don't think we can differentiate between refugees who are and are not under threat. There are refugees and internally displaced people across Tigray in the Hamdayat camp in Sudan. Also, refugees who have been relocated to the Amara regional state, just south of Tigray, relocated by UNHCR. We have internally displaced people, new numbers of 500,000 in Hamara, newly displaced of 100,000 in Afar because of the border incursions committed by the TPLF fighters into those regions. And so there is a serious humanitarian issue, not just concerning two isolated camps in Tigray, but in the wider North Ethiopian region and affecting three regions of the country.
And I know there's no simple solution, but what more can possibly be done to stop the fighting in the region that's led to all of this?
Well, I think there have been efforts to stop the fighting. Certainly, the federal government in June declared a unilateral ceasefire. We didn't see efforts, sadly, reciprocated by the other warring faction, the TPLF fighters. In fact, we saw the conflict and the humanitarian situation spread following the withdrawal of federal forces and following the declaration of that ceasefire. We have seen the African Union appoint a special envoy for whatever talks or dialogue or mediation, et cetera, takes place. Other than that, we have seen a wide chorus of calls across the international community for negotiations, for something being referred to as a negotiated political settlement. But at the moment, there's no such hope for the cessation of the fighting in sight, really, because the government has deemed a lack of equivalency between itself, a duly elected federal government and a legitimate federal government, and an entity which its parliament, Ethiopia's parliament, has declared a terrorist group. Now, if we see some more moderate voices perhaps come together in Tigray, perhaps talks would be possible. But there's a reluctance, and I think there's some concern much concern on behalf of the Ethiopian government that whereas punitive measures have been lodged towards itself and the Eritrean government, calls of condemnation towards things like reprisal killings of Eritrean refugees, and the border incursions into Afar and Amara, and calls for the withdrawal of the fighters from those regions. No punitive measures have been taken against this third party to the conflict as well, the TPLF, only words. And so there's concern that there's this lack of equivalency, and a lot of hope is vested in the AU's appointment of former Nigerian President Obasanjo, somebody who's well known to the region, well respected across the continent. But what the next first step is in that process is still unknown.
Right, and we often do get, strongly worded statements, but not really much action. And this Human Rights Watch report says that these atrocities in these camps amount to war crimes. What kind of response should the international community mount, and what realistically is possible given that even humanitarian aid has been blocked from coming in?
Well, there's a recognition that there's no easy Venn diagram to put over this conflict and to analyze, and it certainly cannot be analyzed in the context of one report on two refugee camps. There have been large-scale atrocities committed elsewhere, where children have been killed, where children have been used as child soldiers, which is another kind of war crime, where looting, border incursions have occurred, where people have become internally displaced, where starvation has been used as a weapon of war by sealing off communities in the North Wollo region and elsewhere. And so Tigrayan communities remain very much affected by this conflict, but so do communities elsewhere. And it was very encouraging this week to see the outcome of a meeting that the Minister of Peace in Ethiopia had with the humanitarian partners of the country, and a recognition that a more coordinated and consistent approach needed to be taken to the humanitarian concerns across the regions. Mm. There are issues that have arisen concerning, well, I mean, the situation in Tigray and elsewhere is one that involves warfare called an insurgency. An insurgency is about war amongst the people. Okay. And whether the people want to or not, they become involved in the war. And anyone who doesn't toe the line of the insurgents or doesn't support the insurgency lives in fear. And okay. I suspect that accounts for many of the refugees as well.
Okay, we'll leave it there for now. Anne Fitz-Gerald joining us from Waterloo, Canada. Thank you.